Welcome to Big Little Stories. I'm Ivy Charmetz. Here's a question for you. What was your first thought this morning when you woke up? Well, my guest today says your first thought of the day is a critical step in living a life filled with greater happiness. That sounds pretty good to me. Scott White is a successful CEO, speaker, and author of the Life is Too Short Guy Strategies to make today the best day ever. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, great to see you.
I have the book here. I complete with notes. I love this book. Let's start with the most obvious question, which is why is it called The Life is Too Short Guy? Who is that?
So, during COVID, I started working with a new executive coach. And the first call, he interviewed me. We talked a little bit, and then he gave me some personality tests. And then we hopped on a second call. His name is Kevin, and I literally remember this exactly what he did. We got on the call. He's like, "Dude, you are like the life is too short guy. Everything's rah rah. Get it done today. Positivity." And I'm like, yeah, I guess. But honestly, I never thought of it that way. It's just who I am. There wasn't a, a package or a name for it. So that night, I mentioned to my wife, I met this guy Kevin today. I'm using him as executive coach, and he called me the life is too short guy. And she's like, yeah, I could see that. And then we're talking a little bit more, and she's like, maybe that's the book you always wanted to write.
Wow.
And I was like, what would that book be about? Of course, she knows me better than I know me. I'm very, very fortunate. I've been with my wife since high school, and she planted that seed, and then she watered that seed a little bit, and she followed up with me a few weeks later, and she sort of motivated me to say, all right, maybe this is the book. And then one thing led to another. A year later, I had the book, The Life is Too Short Guy.
Wow. So the premise of the book is really that we all have control over our happiness and we can all be happy. But one of the stats that you have in the book, which I was so surprised, is that 80% of our thoughts are negative. Were you surprised when you learned that?
You know, Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised when I picked up any of the stats. There's
Mm.
there's a bunch of stats early in the book, and by the way, I tried really hard not to make it a book full of stats. It's
Right.
not an academic book. It's as you know because you've read it. It's very much an approachable. Everyone could read this book. I think a high school student, and I've had 90-year-old people send me notes about it. But the stats are compelling and unfortunately to a certain degree expected. So 80% of all thoughts are negative. 90% of news media coverage is negative. The one that resonates with me the most that really blew my mind. And this was a couple of years ago, so I'm optimistic it has changed. But as of a couple of years ago, according to a University of Chicago public opinion poll, Americans were more unhappy than they've been in 50 years. Think
Wow.
about that. A half a century, Americans are more unhappy in what I believe is, quite frankly, the greatest time in the evolution of human society. Sure, there are things that we need to overcome and challenges, but when you look at who we are and where we are in evolution times, in terms of who we are in the United States relative to 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, wow, we've come a long way. And to find that Americans are more unhappy than they've been in half a century, that's compelling and a little bit disappointing.
Do you have any insight into how they measure happiness?
I don't. I actually don't know how that study was conducted. I looked at a whole bunch of different
Yeah.
studies, and that one seemed to resonate the most. Unfortunately, there are many more stats that I could throw at you, but I won't bore you, that kind of back up similar findings.
Well, so it's interesting you say your book is not about stats. It's a wonderful read, and the thing that I love about it is that it's really about the experiences you've had and the people that you've met along the way. And I feel like we should start with how you start the book, which is talking about your dad. And he had a health scare when you were younger, and it was something that was so impactful that you actually referred to that health scare when your dad passed away, and you spoke at his funeral. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I often get the question, was there a moment you became who you are, the life is too short guy, or this rah rah, Mr. Positive, super happy? And the answer is no. I wasn't born this way, and I think it was a series of evolution things that happened over the course of my life, and there are three or four that I talk about in the book. The first one is when I was 10 years old. It was 1984, and I was doing a job around the house with my dad. We were refurbishing my brother's bedroom, and he cut himself. We were hanging the last piece of paneling. He sliced his finger, and we decided he should probably go get it looked at. So he goes off to the emergency room with my grandfather. I fall asleep. A few hours later, my mom jars me awake and tells me Dad had a heart attack while waiting in the emergency room. I then watched him in the hospital. He was probably in the hospital about a week, as best I can remember. It's been quite a long time. And then he and my mom flew to Houston because his doctor said he needed bypass surgery. And in 1984, there weren't many doctors that did this risky surgery. So 1984, he flies to Houston, has the bypass surgery. And then a few days go by. I'm staying at my grandparents' house with my brother, and I hear the phone ring. My grandmother answers it, and she calls me into the kitchen, and she hands me the phone. And this is one of the most salient moments of my life. I remember holding the phone and hearing, Scott, it's Dad. I collapsed. I literally remember falling to the ground. Everything that had been built up, which I couldn't fully appreciate. I mean, at 10 years old, I had no real concept of emotionally what was going on or what time frame went by. Remember, this was, in the day where we didn't have texts and constant updates. So I don't know how long he was gone, and I didn't know what was transpiring. And here I was hearing his voice. And it was at that moment that I think the initial seeds were planted. Again, I wouldn't have told you 20 years ago, I'm the Life is Too Short guy. In fact, I wouldn't have even told you that 5 years ago. But I think that was a quintessential moment in the formation of this, wow, I could have lost my dad then. And ever since that point, I think I appreciated the finiteness of life.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was so moving in the book was you talk about at your dad's funeral, when you're giving the eulogy, you talk about how because of that moment and really, but for the fact that he cut his finger, he was in the hospital and kind of in the right place at the right time for something like that to happen, that it gave you the opportunity for him to have so many more life moments with you. And you say, and this really touched me, that there's something about being able to give a eulogy and have be so grateful and so positive. Did you intentionally make it a positive moment, or was it something that just poured out of you in that way?
So again, it gets back to, it's just who I am.
Yeah.
I don't go out of my way to be like, how could I make this more positive? It's just the nature of who I am. And when I created the book, The Life is Too Short Guy, I created a concept that I called LITSIG, Life is Too Short Guy. It's an acronym, and there are 10 principles associated with it. And the first one, the foundational one, the one that I think we build everything on, is attitude is everything, the power of positivity. There I talk about the lens through which you view the world. And I believe every single circumstance, and I give some examples in the book, every single circumstance has multiple lenses, of which I just automatically choose a generally positive one. Yeah. Now, look, do I look at things and have a negativity bias at times? Absolutely. And are there things that upset me and disappoint me and anger me? Absolutely. It's human nature. But as you said, my father's funeral was, I'd say, one of the worst days of my life, if not the worst day of my life. Yet, as you correctly pointed out, I talked about, I could have lost him in 1984. He had survived another 20 some odd years, and he got to see me graduate high school, graduate college, graduate graduate school. He got to see me get married, have children, buy a house. And yes, while he's not here today and he wasn't there to see my children grow up, and I wish he was, I was truly grateful to say I could have lost him in 1984 and he wouldn't have been there by my side all those years. And that's just part of that principle of attitude is everything, the power of positivity.
Yeah. And you mentioned the aha moments and something. I'm going to keep saying what you say in the book because I was so touched by so much of what you wrote in here. But you say we shouldn't wait for an epiphany to decide that we're going to live by these principles, and we're going to talk about the principles in a minute. But it does seem like life and death situations, either losing someone or almost losing someone, is such a powerful motivator to change your outlook on life. Talk to me about that, and how do you? It feels like when that's what's motivating you, it happens from a different place than if you maybe just decide. Would you agree?
Yeah, so part of my mission with the book and now my speaking is to get people to have that aha moment, that epiphany now, today,
Yeah.
like literally today, as people are listening to this. Not everything's going to resonate, right? Some of the things that the listeners will hear, they'll be like, yeah, that, you know what, that just doesn't make sense for me. But if you could take away little nuggets, little tidbits, little sort of changes in behavior, it's so much better to do on your terms in a proactive way instead of waiting for that, as you mentioned, aha moment, that proverbial kick in the head, that accident, that illness, that whatever it is that changes your perspective and your attitude. Why not do it today? And that's really what I'm trying to convey to people, that you have the control to change your perspective. You have the control to make certain decisions. Why wait for tomorrow? Because tomorrow's not guaranteed.
That's so powerful. I want to talk about your 10 principles. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll give people some tips on how they can make today the best day ever. So we'll take a break, and we'll be right back. So we're talking about with the Life is Too Short guy, about the Life is Too Short guy book, Scott White. Scott, there are 10 core principles with this way of thinking, right? This very powerful way of thinking. And the first one, which you just mentioned, is that attitude is everything, and the power of positivity. And I had mentioned when I was introducing you that you say that the first thought you have every morning is maybe one of the most important thoughts you have all day. Talk to me about that. And how do you make sure you have a positive thought as your first thought in the morning?
This gets back to what I said before about being thoughtful, deliberate, and proactive. You own it. It's your decision. And what I say to people, as you asked at the opening, which was a beautiful opening, is, do you remember your first thought? So I often ask people, do you remember your first thought? And I would say 60 to 70% of the time, people are like, no, yeah, probably not. Maybe it's, I need coffee, or I have to go to the bathroom. So I call that, and I give people a technique, a tool to use, sort of to really ingrain this. And I would love your listeners to give this a shot. I say to people, when you wake up in the morning, reach over to your dresser and literally grab your glasses. And if you don't have glasses, put on pretend glasses. It's totally fine. Go through this act because it's a ritual. And what I talked about there is a lot of people put on what are kind of blurry glasses. It's Friday and I don't feel like getting up. Unfortunately, I think a number of people, and some of them won't admit it, put on what I call blurry glasses. They put on it's February, it's cold, it's dark, I don't feel like getting up, I have so much to do today, this sucks. What I say to people is, why not? It costs you nothing, and it's so easy if you deliberately reach over, grab those glasses, put on bright, shiny, crystal clear glasses. When I woke up this morning, I was like, it's Friday. It's the sun is starting to shine, by the way, at 6:15. The sun's coming up early. I'm in bed next to the woman I love. My daughter is home from college for the weekend. Fantastic. I have an opportunity to go on Ivy's show today and talk about all these wonderful things. Boom. I'm now, 10 seconds into the day? I've said 4 or 5 things I'm happy or grateful for. Look, I understand that I may then step out of bed and twist my ankle. I can't control everything in the day. I can control my first thought and the roadmap that I set for the day. As Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Well, and that kind of leads us to the second principle, which is choose your attitude. And this I thought was just like a life-changing tidbit that you put in the book. Thinking you can control your happiness makes you happier.
Correct. There is ample. So as I said before, I tried not to add a lot of statistics or a lot of data and studies. While I think that's important to provide a foundation, I wanted the book to be really approachable, like really approachable. We all have friends that I don't really read, or younger kids don't like to read as much. I want everyone in the world to read this book. So I tried not to add a lot of data, statistics, things that make the eyes kind of glaze over. But one of the things I talked about is your belief, your agency that you can make yourself happier. And there's a study to back this up with appropriate footnotes. In and of itself makes you happier. You have the ability to control your attitude and to own it. So I say to people in the first principle, choose your attitude is everything, the power of positivity. In the second principle, choose your attitude, be thoughtful and proactive, and own it, whatever that is.
Uh, the third principle, and this was one of my favorite examples in the book, which is little things make a big difference. And you tell this wonderful story about the shirt that you wore on the date you had with your first date you had with your wife, and how every year on the anniversary of that date you wear that shirt. Just what a first of all, what a beautiful love story, and then just what a great memory. Why is that shirt so important?
So it's a symbol. One of the things I talk about, so little things make a big difference as a principle, is a series of really small things that can have an outsized return on your happiness. And one of those is symbols. So symbols of happiness, gratefulness, love, whatever it is. We all need reminders. Again, we go through the daily grind of whatever's going on in our life, and no one's life is perfect. No one's life is everyone has things they need to deal with. So whether it's that shirt, which I've now worn on June 28th for 35 years, and I'm proud to put it on, whether it's that shirt as a symbol of our love, or whether it's I have a poem next to my desk that I read almost every day, it's just a reminder. It's those corny mugs, it's those hats, those shirts that say smile, be positive, whatever it is, they actually work. And symbols are one example of little things make a big difference.
And then the next principle is funny things are everywhere. Is it easy to find the humor in everything?
It is. So it's again being thoughtful, deliberate, and proactive. You could find humor in every situation. Laugh at yourself, laugh at the world around you, laugh every day. And in the book, I give examples of humor I brought to both my father's funeral and my mother's funeral. My mother's been gone now about 8 years, and talk about two of the worst days of my life is eulogizing both of my parents. At both funerals, I used humor, and people laughed both times. So if you could find humor at a funeral, you could find humor everywhere. And there have been a number of empirical studies that I reference in the book that demonstrate that laughing creates endorphins and dopamine, which make us happier.
And then minutes matter. And I think we have, about 14 million minutes of life active minutes to live our life.
So the analogy that you're giving, so here I tell people that I'm not an expert on productivity or efficiency. I'm not going to teach you how to get more minutes out of your day or how to get more out of your minutes. I want you to think about your minutes differently. And what you talked about is when you're born, you have about 42 million minutes plus or minus, assuming that you have a life expectancy of 80 years. So for just making the math really easy, I say to people, assume, and everyone will have to adjust the math on their own, assume you're halfway through life. If you're halfway through life at 40 years old, you have 21 million minutes left. You're going to sleep a third of those now. You're down to 14 million minutes, which is exactly what you just referenced. And that doesn't even count the minutes you're going to lose, because invariably as we age, we're going to have illnesses, injuries, setbacks, where we're just not going to be as productive. So I really encourage people to think about their minutes, how they use their minutes, be thoughtful, deliberate, and specific in your minutes, value your minutes. And I give a symbol, a tool for people to use to think about how they're using their minutes.
The next principle is learn, learn, learn. And this is another one of my favorites, because there's something you talk about where the natural curiosity, and even talking to strangers and having that curiosity that makes you want to, it's what brings people closer together. And you definitely exhibit, from the moment I met you and the first conversation I had with you, I could tell that you had this amazing natural curiosity. Why is learning important to happiness?
So learning is important to happiness, to keep ourselves fresh, to keep ourselves thinking, to keep ourselves challenged, to get out of our comfort zones. So I talk there about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and the ability to recognize that we all have the ability to continue to learn. And I specifically try to encourage people when they either read the book or when I speak to them to learn something totally unrelated, to do something. I've met people along this journey where people say after I spoke to them, they then learned how to play a musical instrument. Somebody decides to take pilot lessons. These are all things to get us out of our comfort zone, to challenge us, to keep us inspired and motivated.
Well, and that's the next principle. Take a chance and get it done today.
So here I'm really encouraging people to, again, get out of their comfort zone and chase those dreams. We're all dreamers, but we all get the yes buts. The, yeah, but it's expensive. Yes, but I don't have the time. Yes, but I don't know where to start. Yes, but what if I fail? Well, what if we eliminated those yes buts and we encourage people, and I give some tools in the book, to chase dreams, whether it's professional dreams, social dreams, hobby dreams, vacation dreams, whatever it is. So I refer to the work of Bronnie Ware in the book. Bronnie wrote a book. She's a palliative care nurse from Australia who wrote a book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the biggest regret people have on their deathbeds is the regret of what they did not do. It's not the dumb mistake they made. It's the regret of what they did not do. So I encourage people, don't wait until the end and look back and say, I wish I had. Eliminate the yes buts and chase your dreams.
I want to make sure we get to the rest of these principles. So the others are, you can't make it alone, which I know is something that you learned early when your dad passed away. Passion and live today, don't wait for tomorrow. Scott, how transformative is this way of thinking? If someone applies these principles, what does it really do to their life?
Oh, I think that, so first of all, I don't think you have to apply all the principles, right? I give 10 principles, and as your listeners probably heard, they're fairly simple principles. That's the whole point of it. So pick tidbits of what works for you. Can't make it alone, or choose your attitude and own it, or whatever it is. And if everyone in the world can adopt a few principles, think about how much happier each person would be. And then the ripple effect that we have in the world around us as we impact other people. Just listening to this and talking about this, I think, will make the world a happier place.
Is everyone capable of being happy regardless of what their circumstances are?
So everyone is capable of being happier. Happy is not an absolute definition. So there's not a bar of, I need to get to happy. It is, here's where I am today, and everyone's in a different spot. And by using these principles and being thoughtful and really thinking about and being deliberate in how you approach life, you could be a little happier. And a little happier, and a little happier. One of the taglines I use is making the world happier one smile at a time. If we each could be a tad happier, think about what a better world we'd live in.
Oh, that's so great. The book is called The Life is Too Short, Guy, Strategies to Make Every Day the Best Day Ever. Scott, how do people get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
So the best way is to check out the website, lifeistooshortguy.com. That's lifeistooshortguy.com. And you can get my social media handles there. You can find out about buying the book or find out about my speaking engagements as I'm out spreading this happiness around the world right now.
I love it. I love it. Scott, we end each show with the same questions. We call it 3 big little questions. We do a little rapid fire. Are you ready?
I hope so.
How do you get yourself, I'm dying to hear your answer to this question. How do you get yourself out of a bad mood?
I think about these principles. I just live these principles. Absolutely, 100%. There's no doubt. And people often ask me that question. Are you ever in a bad? We all are. But I look at the brighter side. I smile. I laugh. Little things make a big difference.
What's your favorite karaoke song?
Ooh. Let's go with Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
Perfect. And do you have a favorite spot in New Jersey? What's your go-to spot in New Jersey? I think I know what you're going to say.
Oh, there's no doubt Rutgers. I am proud to be a Rutgers alum. I'm passionate about Rutgers. My wife and I spent significant time there. And Rutgers is definitely my favorite place. I got a few favorite places there in particular, but yes.
Thank you so much for being here today, Scott. I love this conversation. I love this book. It's something that, and I feel, I have to say, it's something that since I read it, I keep kind of like referring back to certain passages, and it's just a great book. And thank you for talking to me about it today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. And that'll do it for Big Little Stories for today. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at Big Little Story Show. I'm Ivy Sharmetz. I'll talk to you next time.